If you guys can hear me okay, are you seeing my screen as well?
Yes, we can see it.
Great. So, Ricard, Ron, Tori, and everyone, thank you so much for giving me a little bit of time to go through some of what we are working on with respect to certifications. What I was looking to show you this morning is some of our findings, our early findings around the certification program as we've been working on it the last month and a half or 2 months. And then also just some of the trend research that we are paying attention to with respect to both trends in education, but also sort of broader trends that we're looking at that will, we think, ultimately have a pretty significant impact not only on the education environment within which many of our users find themselves, but also just trends that will impact learning and learning environments as well, which not only have an impact on students, will certainly also have an impact on professionals and a subsequent impact on certifications. So what I'd like to do this morning is just kind of walk you guys through some of what we are finding with respect to certifications. And some of our early findings have been pretty interesting. We've been working with teams at Burning Glass and some other companies that do research. And one of the things I thought was pretty compelling early on is this table that is on screen now. Hopefully you guys can see it okay. And really what this table is showing us is that within the job market, in certain many corners of the job market, there are indications of undersupply of certifications. And we've learned this from Burning Glass in the research that they do. And what I've done on this particular slide is just highlight for you some of the areas in the job market where under-certification is happening. And you can see sort of fourth from the top there is in the space of architecture and engineering. There's an under-certification issue within that space in those industry segments. Also within design and entertainment and media. So again, areas where Autodesk has a significant footprint and where the industry segments see that we're sort of demonstrating an under-certified workforce. And then the last one is construction, which is another area of our focus. And so the reason these certification that these particular industry segments are under-certified is that these are really kind of hard to fill skills, and the readiness requirement is pretty high in these industry segments, and because they're hard to fill skills, they're hard to fill jobs. So they're almost a signal for us, and some of the things that we've been looking at with respect to how we can create a certification program and a certification strategy that gets users and allows them to sort of train up on these hard to fill skills and apply and get into these hard to fill jobs. So it's sort of a supply and demand issue that we're working with. With that, the rest of what I'm showing you is kind of some of the stuff that we've been working on internally, because these industry segments are quickly changing, disrupting, and merging. So attaching certification into an industry segment like construction or even architecture and engineering is going to be really interesting and really challenging. I think a lot of fun, but I ultimately think it's an opportunity for huge growth for the certification program that Autodesk is developing. So one of the things that we know, sort of doing a deep dive around that architecture and construction segment, one of the things that we've been looking at internally, and you can hopefully see this stat on screen, is that the world will need to build more than 2 billion new homes over the next 8 years. And this is data pulled from a UN report that came out. It was first published in 2015 and then it was revised in 2017. And really what it says, some of the interesting stats here, is that even in the UK alone, the population is expected to increase by 16%, with projected household growth at 23%. which will result in a 7% difference in demand. And so this is kind of interesting for us as we start to look at construction and manufacturing specifically, because as people live longer and 1 and 2 person households increase, the number of future households required rises faster than the population. So you can sort of extrapolate this out from the UK and look at more developing countries where infrastructure and progress is starting to look more similar to developed countries, and there's an improvement in the standard of living and extended life expectancy. And so household sizes are on the decrease, but population is on the increase. So it means families are getting smaller, but there are more of them, which puts a strain on the housing market. We basically need more small houses. And the way that we think we're going to be able to manage that demand is that construction and the construction of new buildings, new houses, is going to start to look more like manufacturing. And so there are many kind of day-to-day processes that we don't perceive as manufacturing, and construction is one of them. And it doesn't easily fit the model. But what you're seeing is Andrew Anagnost, our CEO, on stage at OTC a couple weeks ago, and he's really starting to see, for us to be able to meet this global demand in housing and building, to meet the populations rising, construction will need to adopt some of the methodologies and tools of manufacturing. So that's kind of interesting, because you start to think about construction in a typical, the building that we occupy in San Francisco took a year to build in 1960. If that same building had been built using manufacturing processes, it may have gone up much quicker. And so there are examples of this starting to percolate out in the environment a little bit. Some of the stuff that we're seeing, and this is a building that went up in just about 16 days. It was built by the Broad Group, which is a industrial heating and cooling company in China. They've been doing heating and cooling for buildings for about 30 to 40 years. What they ended up doing is applying their manufacturing process to construction. And so we think this is kind of a glimpse of what the future of construction might look like, where a lot of the building materials are prefabricated off-site and then brought to the job site and assembled. The reason we think this is kind of interesting is because if you can put up a skyscraper in 2 weeks, it may give some hope to meeting that global housing demand that I showed you on the prior slides. And so kind of what we're starting to see is, wow, if you can stand up a skyscraper in just about 2 weeks, the likelihood of being able to stand up other kind of building structures, housing structures, just as quickly is probably going to be more real and sort of more a part of the way construction works in the future. And so really the reason this is important for what we're talking about this morning is you're seeing this massive disruption happening in construction, but you're also seeing the expansion of what it means to work in a manufacturing process. Today, currently, there really aren't a lot of firms who work in this manner. We think that will be on the rise, and that rise in working in this way will give a rise to new jobs that will require new skills that don't yet exist. And there aren't really programs in academia disciplines that are feeding into the kind of industry requirements and industry segments that we're seeing represented by this example like this. So it's this really rich, fertile area for us to explore what the future of certification looks like when it sits squarely between where the academics and disciplines are and the emerging practices of industry, and bringing those two things together in these shorter, quicker cycles, we think is going to open up a lot of opportunity for certification in these spaces that we highlighted before, architecture, engineering, and construction. Another trend that we're also following and this is an article from the Wall Street Journal that published just last week, is that because things are changing so quickly in the industries and job market that Autodesk is focused on and serving, employers are starting to think and rethink what it means to train their employees. So this is an example from Schweitzer Engineering, which is an engineering lab in Pullman, Washington. And what's interesting about this particular article and this particular company specifically is that the workers in this, at Schweitzer Engineering, take classes in algebra, in physics, in writing. There's a library in the company, and the reason for it is because they started to see that it takes an average new worker to get up to speed. It takes them an average of about 5 years, and the company really doesn't see new workers coming into those jobs as being qualified for the kind of work that needs to happen in their company. And so they're taking it upon themselves to teach those workers kind of some of the skills that they're not learning in college as a way to sort of close the skill gap, but also help the company remain competitive. So there is this interesting trend we're also seeing where there's a lot of training happening within the companies, and that's not new necessarily, the training side of it, but it is kind of new for a company to hold classes in discipline areas like mathematics and physics, which are some of those discipline and knowledge areas that you're meant to get in college and bring with you to the workforce, and they're seeing that they can do a quicker, more effective job doing it themselves. There's another trend kind of attached to this where students are interested in and want faster degrees. So if you think back to that example of a skyscraper going up in 2 weeks, it really starts to paint this picture of, well, how much time is the right amount of time to study in a university if you're going to go out into an industry segment that's quickly disrupting the change. So if you're sitting in a classroom studying construction management or manufacturing engineering, and that industry segment is dramatically different by the time you reach it as a new worker, it really starts to put pressure on and raise questions about the length of time a student should spend in a degree program. And so that back article is from the Chronicle of Higher Ed, and in the Chronicle of Higher Ed, they started to see that schools like Purdue University, and we've been in discussions with the California community colleges and other college systems, they're starting to look at these pathways to career that are much shorter, that are much tighter, more tightly correlated between sort of the academic and employer spaces, and wanting to have these really rich, tight feedback cycles between the two. So, as these industries are moving, faster and faster and are starting to focus on skills over degrees, it's also putting pressure on, traditional academic 4-year degree programs. And we're starting to see that emerge not only domestically in the U.S., at least from a conversation standpoint, some of the schools like Purdue, but we're also hearing about it in China and some other geographies that we work in as well. So those are a couple of the trends that we're starting to see and pay significant attention to. There are some other trends that I think are important for us to be mindful of as well. We've been for some time looking at the game industry because we think the game industry is quite an interesting signal for us to pay attention to when it comes to certification and learning specifically. And the reason for that, there are really 2 or 3 reasons. The first is just the volume of individuals engaged in gaming and video game playing specifically. And so some of the stats that are kind of surprising here are that 71% of the global population play games. And of those, 27% of them play those games at work, which is kind of interesting. And then we're also seeing some stats come out that adult women represent a greater proportion of the video game playing population than boys under the age of 18. And so video game playing is becoming almost this ubiquitous hobby or engagement globally, and we think it will have a corresponding impact on learning. And the reason for that, for any of us who've ever played a video game, they're kind of immersive environments, and you're actually learning about a quest or learning about a task as you play. And for us, that's similar to almost learning in a transdisciplinary way. You're learning in the context that you're working in. Your learning is kind of invisible and in the background, but it's helping you progress toward completing a task or working on a certain project. So for us, all of the articles that are coming out of publications like Nature and other publications around cognitive control and gaming and its impact on the way that we learn and the way that we engage with one another, I think is also super important with respect to not only the future of learning, but certainly the future of certification. And we started to see even examples of this as well. So what I have here is a game that we've been talking to the developers of, and this game is called Future Construction Managers. And the way that the game works and what happens in the background is that in the state of Pennsylvania in the US, the local unions, the construction unions, require new employees to go through this game. And the reason that they require it is the game introduces the concepts of, what a job site is like, how that job site is increasingly becoming digitized. They have brief examples, like this is calculating area and volume. And so there is some almost conceptual and mathematical content being shared with new workers and sort of testing them on it. And in the background of this game, badges are being issued to the people who play it. And the hiring managers in these union positions are looking at the individual's badges and selecting those individuals who are, passing this game and playing at a higher level than some others. And so badging and certification is being attached to games like this, and these games are being used to screen entry-level candidates who are applying to some of these positions. So we think that gaming overall, though we may not, embed ourselves in a game environment like this, given the sheer volume of people who are immersed in this environment, who are playing this on a daily basis, it's important for us to understand game mechanics and social mechanics and how they work, as well as how the learning in a game, which is kind of ambient in the background, really sets up, a learner or a new worker for success in a particular position. So these are some examples that we think that are really interesting. And that's kind of driven us within Autodesk Education to sort of rethink about our users in terms of these classifications. In the same way that video games may classify a player depending upon kind of the role that they want to occupy within a game, we're thinking in those terms with our own users of our software. And so we're thinking about them in terms of their novice level or experience level. We're thinking about them in terms of the personas and the roles that they are developing skills in and classifying based on those roles and skills. And so we are taking this approach, and this is a screen grab from some of the data science work that we're doing on the back end to really sort of better understand the data that we have in our tools, how to collect and classify our users, and then also how to connect them with one another. Because in the world of game mechanics, peer-to-peer connection and learning from peers is really important. And so we also see that happening in badging environments as well. When you look at some of the spaces that we're paying attention to with respect to ed tech startups, the peer-to-peer learning and the badging and almost gamification of learning is becoming a really sort of pervasive trend. And so we look out across the education environment and start to think about, wow, all these impacts will, or all these trends rather, will have a pretty significant impact on the way that we're thinking about evolving our certification programs to include things like micro-credentials and badges, and then we're also thinking about the environments within which some of our learners and users and professionals will be able to obtain these badges and credentials. And you can kind of see over on the right side of this slide just a snapshot of some of the players in the EdTech world who are starting to focus on tutoring, test prep, testing and assessment, badging, and credentialing. So we're having conversations with a lot of these different EdTech players to better understand this space and how we might diversify our portfolio of certifications to include, some of the badging and credentialing that we see as trending. And so we know just because, the EdTech startups are pretty pervasive, we've started to play around and explore how Autodesk might be relevant in this particular space. And so what you're seeing on screen is just basically a video of my own iPhone. And this is, I think, another really interesting trend to pay attention to is that learning and some of these immersive learning environments are completely mobile. And so what you're seeing on screen right now is a course that we published with Coursera, and it's a Future of Manufacturing and Innovation course. And this course, will take a learner through being able to describe different manufacturing and key stages of the process. They'll be able to get some exposure to the trends that are influencing the future of manufacturing, and then they'll also get, some foundational knowledge and skills in Fusion 360. And so we're looking at course structures like Coursera and other platforms as being able to spread the access point and really reach users where they are, which is on mobile devices, in these immersive learning environments. And we think there might be an opportunity here as well to attach certification maybe or credentialing, to some of these environments as well. And so this is really born out of, if you look at Andrew Eaton, who's the founder of Coursera, some of the stuff that he's very interested in is this idea of lifelong learning. And so that's very interesting to us at Autodesk as well, and it's interesting to all of us. If you think back to that earlier example where a skyscraper goes up in 16 days, you take a construction manager who is working on that project and maybe rewind their experience 3 or 4 years, it was highly unlikely that leading up to that project they had any experience, standing up a skyscraper in 2 weeks. And so they had to learn that process. So we know that lifelong learning, because the industry is changing so dramatically, we know that lifelong learning will be a requirement of both workers just entering the job market, but also experienced professionals who are already in the job market. I have an example in this. I spoke with one of our named accounts last week, and it's a big company. It's based in Germany. It's a conglomerate, and one of the issues that they cited, the chief operating officer cited to me, is that they're having a lot of trouble with their more experienced engineers who are really in the age range of 40 to 55 years old. And the reason they're having trouble is because many of those engineers are relying on a way of working, a set of tools and approaches that they learned earlier in their career. And they aren't updating their skill set, their approach, or the technology they use. And so it's putting pressure on this particular company when it comes to competing for new work, because their employees aren't updating their skill set. They are kind of locking the company into a certain era, if you will, and they're having a lot of trouble sort of breaking out of that. So one of the things they're interested in is how do you create backable moments
that will incent and motivate more senior workers to adopt a mindset that allows them to, approach every task with a fresh lifelong learning approach. Because if you have that fixed mindset, it really does hamper the company's ability to adopt new technology, new processes, and bid for new projects that need to take advantage of those new processes and technology. So lifelong learning, we know is starting to become really an economic imperative for our customers as well. And so they do want and are interested in really seeing what we can do with our certification program to expand its diversity, to both make it more accessible to a wide variety of workers, but also make it more lightweight so they can pick up badges and credentials much more readily in context. So that's taken us to creating some different concept sketches with what we think the future of learning might look like. And this is one of our early sketches that we're still following a lot of what we've learned by sketching out some of the trend data. And so for us, we talk a lot within Autodesk about the future of making things. And because we're in education and because of those trends we cited previously, with skyscrapers don't have been 2 weeks, with construction looking more like manufacturing, with learning becoming much more immersive and happening outside of classroom environments and online and on mobile, and because of the nature and immersion and ubiquity of game playing and ambient learning environments, we're starting to think, hey, there's a real deep connection between making and learning, and we need to make that explicit because our base of users, our customers, our students are going to find themselves in these industry segments that are rapidly disrupted. So we're doing some research now in how the future of making things and the future of learning things intersect, and how they're reinforcing concepts, and how that move from learning to making and making to learning accelerates as we carve out sort of a larger understanding of the world around us. And we also have an opportunity to build deeper theories and ecosystems that relate to badging and certification as we engage with these experiments. So for us, sort of getting back to some of the trends that we were just talking about a moment ago, we're really questioning the linear and fixed nature of education and degree programs. And that is, if you go to primary school, you can go to secondary school, you can perhaps go on to college, get a degree, get certified, and get a job. So it's a very linear and fixed model, and our understanding of competencies and almost the skills required for certification assumes that there are very few fixed pathways based on majors and disciplines and certain tools. So we're actively questioning that. With some of the trend data we're seeing, we think it looks more chaotic than that linear pathway. And we think, the challenges of today and tomorrow with things like the massive resource disruptions that automation are bringing and creating in the world, with the merger of manufacturing and construction, we kind of are understanding that we need to think about learning, we need to think about skills and tools and mindsets as lifelong and not fixed. And so we're really starting to think in these terms, and some of the work that we're doing is just reimagining how a student or professional's journey might look in the future of making and the future of learning. And so in this case, a learner will pick up a new skill which opens opportunity in an industry segment. They'll need to learn new tools when they join that industry segment. And we know those tools like Fusion and Gen 360 and other tools are changing rapidly on a monthly basis. And so they'll need to continue to update their skills, continue to learn how those tools are changing. And then their requirements as a team player in the place they're working are changing pretty dramatically as well. We know that all those experiences kind of come together or snap together. And this is, I think, a first sketch that I want to share with you guys, a first sketch in the way that we're thinking about evolving our certification program, because we know that it's beyond the tool, that it's also skills. There's a skill requirement there. We think that there are team and role requirements, and that the place within which you work or the place within which you gain that skill and that demonstration of your skill, a badge, come together to make kind of a unique set of experiences that open new opportunities for workers. And so what I'm demonstrating here is just the lifelong nature and sort of pulsing of this learner journey as they continue to gain new skills, new tools, join new teams, work in new places, and pick up new mindsets. And so really one of the things that we're talking to Ricard about leading up to this session with you guys today is really just broadly speaking, when we're talking about certification now, we're thinking beyond the tools themselves. And we're thinking that certification absolutely has to still cover things like Fusion and BIM and Inventor and Revit and all the different certifications we're focused on today. But increasingly, we know because of the industry disruption that there needs to be some element of skill and there needs to be an element of mindset. And so, some of the research that we've been documenting is that employers will often resort to requesting a college degree for positions that never required one before. And that's really because they need some kind of indication that the workforce or the individual they're hiring is prepared for the work they're going to do. They'd much rather see, in many of these cases, a more lightweight credential or certification stand in place of a degree. So we do think there's a lot of opportunity to diversify our portfolio of certification while at the same time addressing some of the skill gap and some of the knowledge and skills that might be represented in some of the badges we're looking to develop. And so we've been working on some of these concepts as well. So the way that we sort of worked on it the last year or so, we've taken a tool like Fusion, just to give you a relative example of the way we're thinking about it. We took Fusion and kind of tapped it with many of the ideas that I've just shared with you. And so this is just a quick example that I'll show you of some of the ways that we're reimagining the use of our tools and the learning of them and how we might look for valuable micro-credential or certification moments. And so in this case, the designer is designing a set of headphones. And up in the upper right, it's demonstrating kind of his skill as he progresses through his design. And so what you're seeing are at this time, 7 workspaces of Fusion and where this particular person, Bill Saber, is spending his time developing his use of the tool. And as he continues to progress through the design of his headphones, he's picking up new skill areas. We see something like this data-driven, personalized learning environment attached to a tool like Fusion as being not only a representation of game mechanics, but also a representation of the kind of in-context learning that will be really important as we go into the future of work and in these industry segments. The other thing we're looking at and I've been working on is what we're calling a job task analysis. We're looking at all the different jobs available and really looking at the tasks required of those jobs and then doing some mapping of the skills required to complete those tasks. And so in this case, you're seeing Bill, again, hover over industrial designer, mechanical engineering, and some other roles and exploring the kind of tool use and skill use that he'll need to demonstrate to be able to get an entry-level job. So I'll skip past some of this. Tori makes an appearance here as we started to think about, well, what's it mean to have multiple people come together around a project and really build out completely what a project team looks like with all the different skill maps represented, and then other areas for this team to learn and immerse further in the tool and really complete a project. We took that initial concept sketch, and what I'm showing you on screen now is actually the back end of the tool that we're developing. And so we've actually began to develop that gamified version of Fusion and the Fusion learning environment. And you can see over on the left here, tier 1, tier 2, and then it starts to really become persona-based around designer, engineer, and machinist. And so we're giving our users their command data back to them and showing them what they know, what they need to know next, what they need to know to get a job. And we're doing quite a bit of this work now and bringing learning and courses, and we do think an opportunity for badges within the tool itself. And so I'll move quickly here due to the time, but wanted to give you guys some view into kind of the back end of what we're developing as a learning environment that can benefits of those streams that we talked about a moment ago. And so what you're seeing are just, in this case, all the different workflows associated with this person's a manufacturing engineer, so the different workflows he needs to master in order to get a job. And in the green boxes, we're kind of indicating what he needs to learn next. And then we see the future as being a way of tagging credentials into this environment as well. So this was also kind of highlighted by Andrew. This work was highlighted at AU for those of you who joined AU. So this is a snapshot of the project. And what Andrew's saying on screen, I haven't muted, but what he's saying on screen is we're creating the ability to target certain jobs with skill maps, and those skill maps indicate to a learner not only what they know and what they need to know next, but really what they need to know to get a job. So this project is, the reason I show it, this video, and show you that it made its way out to the main stage, because we do see that economic imperative for our customer base to be able to really delve deeply into learning. So from our side, just really quickly as I wrap up here, we're kind of looking at a number of different dimensions that we think create kind of a whole learner and a learner ready for the future of work and the industry segments that we see as rapidly disrupting. So we know they need to learn the tools, we know they need to have the skills to use those tools, and we know that they need to have a really adaptable and flexible mindset. And so some of the stuff that we've been developing and you guys have access to are a series of courses that both teach technical content, the tool, that teach the skill, like industry and disciplinary content, as well as the conceptual and mindset content. An example of some of these courses are, our Fusion 360 Mastery courses, the Principles of Design Thinking courses that we've published, the combination of those two dimensions in the toolset and skill set courses, and then we have some other courses that cover all three of those dimensions. So that's just a snapshot, I think, that brings you up to speed in some of the ways that we're looking at evolving our certification program to include things like skills and mindsets, and the reason we think that's going to be important as we move forward. So with that, I'll pause and Ricard, I'm not sure if there are questions or anything, but that's kind of the end of what I have to present this morning.
I think we're good, Jamie. Thanks very much.
Okay, great.